Right, so we are at the very first window of Android Studio that says welcome to Android Studio. Hopefully by now you've installed Android Studio and you're ready to go. So we're going to click on the first one there to start a new Android Studio project. So you'll see the first window that you get is to create a new project or create an Android project. So in this window you will actually be able to create your new project, give it a name and so forth. So in this case we're going to give our application a name. Let's just call it my test application, just to give our first application a name. We're not actually going to build something, but just going to go through the basics of the IDE. Okay, so for your application name, it can contain spaces there. So just note that you can add spaces there for your application name, or you can have it one word or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But this will ultimately become your application's name. You can change it later on, but think a bit about because it becomes your package as well. So just think about your application name beforehand. Okay, then your company domain. This is basically just a domain, a website address that you can add in here to make your application on the Google Play Store, to make it unique. Every application on the Play Store must have a unique package name. So it depends on your specific domain. Obviously, if you buy a domain online, that domain is unique, and that is why you can use your domain here and it will be unique. If you do not have a domain, you can just start typing maybe your surname and a few other characters there with your application name. It should also be unique. But to make sure it's definitely unique, try and use a domain name there. Okay, so this is the domain. You can do anything there for now. Then if you go down, you can see your project location. So my project is on the desktop, Android projects, and it's going to be called My Test Application. You can also go to the three dots there and choose a different location for your specific application. Okay, so then the next part, you can see it created your package name for you automatically. You are able to edit it, but it basically takes your domain backwards. So you can see it's za.co.programme.whatever, and then it adds your application name, all lowercase, without any spaces. So this will then become your unique name for your app in the App Store. Okay, so for this page then, do not include C++ support, also do not include Kotlin support unless you know how to work with Kotlin. We're going to use Java in this project, so then we do not include Kotlin support. We're going to go next. In this page, you can see it's still creating a new project, but now we need to select which devices will we target with this application. And you can see there's a few devices that you can program for, which is the phone and the tablet. There's Android Wear, there's a television, there's Android Auto, there's Internet of Things. So it depends on what device you are programming for. So in this case, we're going to use phone and tablet. So if you click on phone and tablet, you must have actually one thing clicked there. You must be able to create an application for something. So we're going to click the phone and tablet, should be automatically clicked. And then the next step here will be to go and choose your operating system that you will support. You can see that it says there some devices require additional SDKs, low API levels target more devices, but offer fewer API features. So you need to choose your version of the operating system that you will support carefully. So in this case, let's say we're taking Android. Let's take the newest version there, 24. And then it says by targeting API 24 and later, your app will run on approximately only 8.1% of all devices currently on the Google Play Store. If you've got an internet connection, this will be a correct estimate of devices that's currently running apps on the Play Store. Okay, so it's only 8.1%. But if you go to a lower version, for example, KitKat 4.4, you can see that it runs on 90.1% of all devices. So if you know that you're only going to create apps for basically that supports Android 8 Oreo, then you will know where you can see there for Android 8, it supports actually less than 1% of all devices. But if you're creating an app for a company and all of them has got Android 8 on their phones, then you can choose this one. But if you're going to place it on the App Store for a lot of users to use, I would recommend going for a lower version. For now, we will in our applications probably use 4.4 or 5.0. 5.0 is also targeting 71%. but I think KitKat. You can go lower. Ice cream sandwich, then you know it's 100%. That one is 100%. 4.1. Okay, so if you want to get 100% of all the devices, you should go for Android 4. So in this case, I think let's just go with 4.4, which is KitKat, and we're targeting 90.1% of all devices. And then you can just say next. In this page, you can see we're still creating the new project, and now we need to add an activity. And an activity is basically a screen that the user will see. So what this window is basically telling us is basically saying, choose a template that you want to start with as the very first activity or the very first screen of your application. So you can see there's a basic activity that's got this yellow button there. There's a bottom navigation activity template. There's an empty one that we're going to use most. There's a login, maps, and so forth. You can go through these templates. So if you, for example, want to look at the navigation drawer that opens up a drawer from left to right, then you can go with this template, and this template will help you with coding on how to do the navigation drawer. But for the most part, we will start with an empty activity and then add everything else to that activity. So if we start with an empty activity, we are also able to actually do the navigation drawer activity. We're just not going to start with coding that's already predefined or pre-made by Android. So we're going to go with an empty activity and say next. And now you need to give your activity, and remember, an activity is a screen that the user sees. So we need to give this activity a name. So you'll see there's two parts here. There's an activity name. This will become your Java file. And there's a layout name, which will become your XML file. So the two files works together. So for one screen that the user sees, they see the layout file, which is your layout name here, which will become the XML file. This is what they see, but what happens in the background encoding is done in your Java file, which will be called main activity. So I'm going to leave it as main activity, and normally what we do is to give these two descriptive names and names that basically go with each other, so that we know that this file, this Java file, belongs to this layout file. So I'm going to name this one main_activity, and then just remove that. So you can see the two are basically now the same. This is main activity and that's main_activity. For your layout name, just make sure that you have everything lowercase, no spaces in between, and that you have, or you can use, the underscore. For the activity name, that's normal Java convention, Java coding on how to create a class. So we start off normally with a capital letter, no spaces in between, and every subsequent word will be capitalized. Okay, so this will be your class name, your Java file, and that will be your XML file or your layout file. Make sure you check also backwards compatibility, so that you make sure that your app can also support lower versions. Then we go to finish. And now we wait for Android Studio to quickly build this project. And when it's done building, we'll come back and have a look at the IDE. Right, then Android Studio is done building the project. And you can see there's the name of your application, My Test Application. You can also see the destination where it's saved, and it's called My Test Application. Okay, so I'm going to close down these files quickly that's currently open. And then we're going to go to the left-hand side. So you'll see at the left-hand side, if you click on project there, maybe you've got something that's this, nothing open. Then you've got project, structure, capture, favorites, build variants, and so forth. We're going to get to these later on throughout the course, but for now, in the project tab is where we're going to work most. So if your project is closed like this, you can open it up by just clicking on it. Within your project tab, there's a few other tabs that you can also choose. So we're going to work with project and Android. So if you go to project, you can see that here is where we basically will add some other libraries and stuff in our libs folder, but we'll get to that later on. So the project one is where we're going to work in some cases, but most of the time we'll work under the Android tab. So it's going to be under project, and make sure it's under Android. So if you get under Android, you'll see two folders there. So folders, first one is the app folder, the second one is the Gradle script. We'll come back to Gradle scripts later on. You can also add libraries in your build.gradle file, but we'll talk about that later on. So forget about Gradle scripts for now. Just do not edit anything in here. You should know what you do when you're editing here, otherwise your project will not work. Okay, so if we go into the app folder, you'll have three folders: manifests, Java, and the resources folder. So if we go into the manifest folder, you'll see that there's your Android manifest file. Now this is also a very important file, and you should not change this file unless you know what you're doing. And you can see this file indicates what is the package for this application. It also tells the operating system what's the label, what's the theme, how many activities are listed inside of this application. You can see that for now we only have one activity, which is called the main activity. It will be the main activity, and it's the launcher activity. So this will be the activity that opens up when you start your application, and it's called main activity. So in the manifest file, you'll see as we start adding new activities, it will also be listed here. So we'll get back to the Android manifest file when we get to later applications. So you can close down the manifest file. Now the next folder is basically your Java folder. So if you go into the Java folder, you'll see there's 3 other folders. So there's 2 that's got some sort of Android test or test in brackets, and there's one that's got nothing in brackets. So this is the one we will use mostly, and you will see if you open up that one, there's the main activity. So this main activity is now the Java file. If you open up that main activity file, you can see it's called mainactivity.java. It's got a package declaration at the top, which is the same package as the one that you've got there, the one that you defined right at the beginning. It's got some import statements, normal Java convention, import statements at the top. And luckily with IntelliJ, by the way, Android Studio is based on IntelliJ. So in IntelliJ, you've got import statements added automatically as you type, which is quite nice. Okay, so in Android Studio and IntelliJ, you've got the same functionality. Right, then you can see there's the normal class declaration, public class, main activity. It inherits from the app compat activity. You remember app compat to make compatibility for lower versions of the operating system also possible. So make sure it extends app compat activity, and it should do so automatically. And then there's the onCreate method that is like the normal main method in Java, and this is where your activity will start. But we will get back to this. So that's the main activity Java file. Now, if we go into the resources folder, the rest folder, you'll see there's drawable, layout, mipmap, and values. So your drawable and your mipmap folders will hold images that you're going to use inside of your application. So under drawable also, you can see there's your launcher. That will basically be the icon that will show when the user installs it on your phone. That will be the icon for the app. The second one is the layout, where we will keep all the layout files that corresponds with our Java files. For example, this Java file main activity is connected to mainactivity.xml there. We'll get back to that now. So this is the layout folder. It will have all the layout file. Also other layout files that's not connected to activities will also be listed inside of your layout folder. So the mipmap folder also, you can see there's part of the drawables of the launcher icon is there, also some of them here. So your drawable and your mipmap folder is for images. If you go to your values folder, you can see there's a colors XML where we will have all the colors for our app. A strings XML if you want to do some translations later on. We're going to use the strings XML, and also styles if you're going to use different styles for different things in your application. Okay, so now let's just go back to the main activity, and you can see in the main activity, one of the first lines there after the call to the super onCreate is set the content view. So we're basically telling this Java file that the content view, or the file that goes with this main activity, is called main_activity, and you get there by saying R, which is resources, then layout, going to the layout folder, and then called main activity, and there it is, mainactivity.xml. So we're linking up the main activity Java file with the main activity XML file. And remember, this is the layout file. And we'll open it now to see how it looks. Luckily, Android Studio, whenever you create a new activity, creates this and sets this up automatically. You must just make sure that then you name the two the same so that it is easy to go and see which Java file goes with which layout file. Now let's close down the Java file and open up main activity XML. Now, depending on the speed of your computer, this could take a while to just refresh the layout. But you can see now we've got a whole new set of options available to us. So before we get into the main activity, let's just go through the top there. You can see that you can open up a new project, you can save, you can sync, you can undo, you can copy, paste, and cut. You can build. There's a run option that we're going to get to in this video still. If you want to run the application, how do you do that? There's debugging. Then this one is to attach a debugger. There you've got your AVD, your Android Virtual Device Manager, that we're also going to do in this video still. And then there's your SDK Manager that we talked about. Right, so let's open up the main activity quickly. And you can see in the main activity, there's the XML file, the layout file. There's two tabs at the bottom. One is for design, one is for text. So if you go to text, you'll see the XML version of your layout. You go into design, you'll see the design editor. So some people like to only use the design, some people like to only use the text, and normally we use both. So I'm going to go into the text one, and I want you to change the constraint layout. So that whole part, just select it and type in linear layout. So don't type the whole thing, just let it autocomplete there for you, and you can see it's the linear layout. And then just make sure that you add an orientation property there. So just start typing orient, and it will give you the orientation property, and you can select it to be vertical. So this is just to make this very first app a bit easier. So if you go back to design, you can see that Hello World is now at the top. I'm going to click on it and delete it. You can just use the backspace or the delete button on your keyboard to delete all the components. And now you can see we've got a blank screen. There's some zoom controls that you can zoom in and out. And then we're going to get to the palette there. So you can see this part there, the palette is basically all the widgets that we can use on the screen. So if I, for example, want to go, and you see the common ones is like the button and the text view and so forth. So if I want to drag in a new button, I can do so and drag in the button and just leave it there, and there's the button. Now I can also drag in, let's say, a text view there to show some text to the user. I can also ask the user to enter some text by just adding what they call an edit text there. Okay, so these are all of my components that I can use on the screen. Now, very important, if you click on any one of these components, you can see that there's an attributes window there on the right hand side that's open, where we can set a lot of properties for that specific component. So for a button, you'll have some properties. For a text view, you will have some of the same properties, some will be different, and so forth. And we're going to look at that in the next video. So make sure about the attributes. We should use this one a lot. This is your attributes. If you click on any component, we can set some settings for it. For example, just as an example, I can set the text for the button as click here, or whatever you want to do, and it changes the text there. Okay, so that's the properties or the attributes window. If you go to the component tree there on the left hand side, you can see that this gives you an overview of what you have on the screen. So you can see our root component is the linear layout, that's vertical, and then there's a button, there's a text view, there's an edit text. So if you're having trouble clicking on a specific component on the screen, it's also easy to just go to the component tree and click on a component there to edit. Then at the top there, you can see that we've got design, blueprint, design, and blueprint. So if you're using a constraint layout, just use the zoom controls. You will probably look at both of these, which is the design and the blueprint. But if you're using just the normal linear layout, the normal design will be fine. Then you can also set the orientation to portrait, authored, landscape. I can make it landscape there. I can make it portrait again. You can also set the UI mode, the night mode, and some other settings you can set there. You can also set the specific device that you want to code on. So let's say you're developing for a television and you want to see how your app will actually function on a television. Then you can go and select a television here, and it shows you how will it look on a television screen, for example. Okay, it will look something like this. Right, so let's just go back to, let's say, Nexus 5 there. Then you can also choose the operating system to see how it will look. So for example, 19 there, if it refreshes, you can see in 19 we did not have the colored notification bar there at the top. So this is how it will look on API 19. On 28, we've got it colored, the same theme as your app. which is quite nice. Then you can also choose the app themes there. You can play around with that. You can also edit your translations, which goes along with your values folders, strings XML, but we'll get to that also later. You've got your zoom controls and so forth. So this is the basics of Android Studio, the IDE, and when we develop our first application, we'll get into this a whole lot more. So the next part that we want to do now is to just click the play button there. And when you click the play button, it's like running now this application on a phone. But now if you have your phone connected to your PC and all the drivers installed and so forth, then it will show also under connected devices. But if you do not have a device to test it on, you can create virtual devices. So you can see I've got a few there, but probably if this is the first time you're running Android Studio, you won't have any devices there. So you need to create a new virtual device. And then it gives you an option of devices that you can create. And I would recommend taking these with the Google Play Store icon there. Okay, so let's go with the Nexus 5 there, for example. And you can see that it gives me, I've only got, for the Nexus 5, I only have one image that is Android 8.0, the Google Play one that I can actually use, or also Nougat. So those two I can use right out of the box because I've installed them inside of my SDK. But if you need another one, let's say API 28, you can download it right from here. So I'm going to select this one, the Oreo one, and just say next. Then you can give your virtual device a name. I'm going to leave it as it is. That's the resolution, that's the operating system. You can choose whether it should always, when it starts up, be landscape or portrait. There's some graphics options, so you can go into the advanced options and make some other changes if you want to. You can set the RAM, for example, if your PC has not got a lot of RAM, you can change the RAM on some of these devices and the SD card and whether it's going to enable a keyboard and so forth. And then you can go to finish after setting up everything. And then after you've set up your virtual device, it will be listed here. And now after it's been listed here, you can now go and select that device and say OK. And now when you click on OK, it will start running that device on your phone. Oh, sorry, not on your phone, on your PC, running your application. Well, it will automatically start running because we clicked on the run button. So let's just wait for the virtual device to get up and running, and then we'll quickly look at it. Right, so we can see that the device is basically up and running now. It's a brand new device, so then it takes some time to actually set up. So you can see that mine is busy trying to install the APK at the bottom. So it's still waiting for the device. Okay, so there's the APK now, and you can see that it has been installed on this phone. And you can see there's the button, there's the text view, there's the edit text where the user can type something. And then that's basically it for this virtual device. You can see it's got the hardware buttons where you can go back. You can use, for example, if I click that button, it takes me to the home screen. If I click on this button, it will give me a list of all the applications. I can remove that application from memory, and then I can go back to applications. I don't know where that is now. Let's just use that one. So there's the applications, and I can search for my test application, and it opens up my application again. So it's a normal phone. You can actually install your Google ID on this, your Gmail address, and then you can download apps also and run it on this device. Your browsers will work, your mail applications will work, your Maps application will work, depending on the internet connection of your specific device that you're running it on. Okay, so this is basically the virtual device. You can also see you can switch it on, off. You can set the volume. You can set the orientation for the phone. How will your app display when you turn it to landscape or portrait? If you've got a webcam, you can also use the camera. You can zoom in. This 3 buttons there is the same as the buttons there. And then there's some other options that you can also select. For example, setting your battery not to 100% but to 67%. Just to indicate that it's busy charging or whatever. So hopefully you've learned something from this video. In the next few videos, we'll create an application and then you'll get used to this environment.